Yeah, just a short time ago also saying he will repay the taxpayer as it probably was out of step with the community expectations, or something along the lines of the kind of thing we usually hear after an expenses scandal like that. Meantime, the New South Wales Premier has instructed the Sydney Opera House to allow its sails to be lit up with the colours, numbers and a trophy, all in order to promote next Saturday's Everest horse race.
As we reported this earlier, that is against the wishes of the Opera House boss. Should the Opera House be taking advantage or be used for these sorts of advertising opportunities? In Taking Stock, we delve into the big issues of the day, and tonight we're joined by Richard Miles, Pro Vice-Chancellor at Sydney Uni, and Warren Mundine, the host of Mundine Means Business, Sundays on Sky News. Thank you both for joining us here.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure. Your initial thoughts. Gladys Berejiklian has said yes to this. Warren, do you think that that opens just the floodgates for all of these sorts of things to come after?
Well, it does open the floodgates for it all and that, but look, I think this is all just arguments, and I was listening to the radio reports the other day. It's all a storm in a teacup. You know, we have a huge event that's coming to Sydney that's going to be bringing lots of tourists, lots of money to Sydney. It's going to be one of the biggest races in Australia. Look, there's nothing wrong with promoting that, and the best way to promote it is, you know, that's one thing we got more over Melbourne is that we got the two icons of the Sydney Harbour Bridge and the Sydney Opera House. So let's use them.
Richard, no problem with it?
I don't. Even I have no problem with it either. But well, you know, you might expect the university professor to say this is a terrible outrage against all cultural things, etc. But I don't. I think it's essentially unproblematic. I would say, I would have liked to have heard her point of view, because I listened to that interview a couple of times.
Didn't get much of a word in,
well, she couldn't get a word in at all. So I felt that was massively unfair, and I felt that I'd be interested to know why she actually didn't want this to happen.
Well, I think we were talking with Tiki earlier. There's a trust, you know, kind of that's set out in the policies, and it seemed pretty clear in that no logos, no text, which maybe they've got around that. But she did seem to be using that trust document as some kind of basis for it.
There was, and look, I understand some of her arguments in regard to, look, it's the Sydney Opera House. It's about, you know, arts and performances and all that type of stuff. Fair enough, but, you know, so look, I'm happy with it. I'm happy with the Everest being in, and it does open up other things as well. But I do understand where she's coming from.
I had kind of had him in my mind when I read the line from someone, maybe in the Fairfax stables, that it's crass commercialisation to promote gambling in a nation that already has a pokey problem. I kind of felt myself a little bit agreeing with that. I think I'm uncomfortable because it's a gambling. Really?
It's Aussies. You know, Aussies. You know, I think, you know, we'll bet on two flies crawling up a wall. And, you know, that's just part of our culture, it's a part of our way. What we need to do is deal with some people, and it is a minority of people, who do have gambling problems, and I've seen them in pokies and stuff like that. But this, you know, I'm a bloke who doesn't believe in banning things just because, you know, you don't like things.
Sorry.
No.
I understand that this was originally planned to be on the Harbour Bridge, and they said, no, that's not okay, so they moved, and then they shifted their focus to the Sydney Opera House. I mean, the question is, where do you stop with Australia's icons? Are we going to be scuba diving at the Barrier Reef and see a, you know, a Tabcorp thing pop up as we swim across looking for fish? I mean, where does it end?
Yeah, be on the Barramundi.
That was my thought too. But then again, with something like this is an iconic race.
Yeah.
And Warren's right, it's bringing a lot of dosh here. And so we need to make sure it's really well publicised.
Speaking of a lot of dosh, I want to talk about Dick Smith and Aldi, because both sides have had a decent dosh in their time. Dick Smith was on Your Money today, and he was talking about Aldi, saying it's going to completely change the face of retailing. It's the most ruthless retailer in the world, the toughest. We're all going to lose our jobs. Let's have a little listen to what Dick Smith had to say today, in case, they're telling me we don't have it. He was saying it's commercialisation at its worst. What do we think of Dick Smith coming out and making a stand like that about Aldi?
I think that's quite funny. He'd have to be the most commercialised person I've ever seen, and how he ruthlessly used free advertising and going out there and making crazy comments and that. Look, he does have an argument in a sense. You know, we're seeing a lot of automation and all that stuff. But all these things would be happening anyway. You know, I work in the mining and energy industry, and that's you know, getting fully more automated. You're seeing trucks that don't have drivers. You're seeing heavy machinery. I saw a train deliver ore to Port Hedland, and there's only one person involved in the whole process. And so you has a concern there, but I'm a great believer there's not going to be as bad as what people think it is, that people are going to be losing jobs. Yes, there are some jobs that are going to go, but you know, there are other jobs and other things that'll be picked up.
Well, I mean, it is the lowest price and the most profitable supermarket in Australia. So, I mean, the question is, do all roads lead to Aldi? Does it just keep on getting bigger and bigger?
Unfortunately, my road does lead to Aldi. I have to admit, I do shop in Aldi, and it's actually not just on price. Do you know what it's really about? It's about simplicity. I like the fact that it's only got 2 different types of ketchup or mayonnaise. I'm not sort of wading my way through masses of all this sort of choice. I'm in and out of there quickly.
Because it's kind of in life, you're a dog or a cat person or a tea or a coffee person, and you're an Aldi or a non-Aldi person, I reckon. It really divides people, don't you think?
But I loved his argument, because I love this idea of what he called extreme capitalism. I don't quite know what that means. I mean, it's capitalism. I mean, it's basically efficient capitalism, and the idea that, you know, be careful, otherwise, you know, we're going to have 2 German supermarkets running Australia sounded like something out of Brexit.
We had a few viewers. I asked viewers what they thought on Twitter. We had a couple write in back to me to just give a few views. I think it's worth showing what viewers think as well, because we discuss these type of issues, but they certainly have their own views. This viewer, Phil, I think he calls himself Phil I Am. He said he reckons Coles and Woolies have basically had to lift their game because of Aldi. He says, what, does Dick Smith want some kind of extreme protectionism of Australian goods and services, a kind of corporate state? And then flip over, and there was one more from a viewer, if we've got the next one, from Snarky Platypus, who says Dick Smith offers little value, that's why he's pulling this stunt.
But you're in trouble if a platypus has a go at you.
He's a snarky platypus, though.
If you look at the UK, it's really interesting. So Aldi have been there for a long time, and you've obviously got exactly the same situation there. You've got Tesco's and Sainsbury's, sort of our Coles and Woolies. And what are they doing? Well, Tesco's are now bringing out a version of Aldi, so this low-cost thing, I think it's called Jack's or something, to compete. And Sainsbury's, well, they're buying up the opposition. So in other words, what you probably will, I think you'll end up with a consolidation. They'll trying to sort of, you know, to replicate Aldi, or they'll go for some sort of consolidation. But there's one called, I think it's called Kaufland or Lidl. They're even cheaper.
Yeah, and they're coming here soon too.
And Aldi, fear them. Well, so basically, they're coming.
Yeah, they're coming to Australia. Yeah.
Well, that's it. I mean, everyone's so just kind of focused on price, really. And the other big story in the supermarket space we saw today was around Coles and its automation of its distribution chains. I mean, you can't really argue with the logic of wanting to save money here, but people are going to lose their jobs. What do you think?
Well, look, the issue is that, you know, you're living in a free market. Yeah, and every country, the richest countries in the world are those countries that, you know, are free market countries, and the highest living standards in the world are from those free market countries. So yes, you're going to have automation. Yes, you're going to have a wide range of things that are happening. But at the end of the day, it's about service. It's about the customer. And now we're making the decisions. You can't have a false economy that forces people to buy this or buy that.
In the end, we're going to have to educate people in a different way. We're coming to the end of the road for those particular type of jobs. Okay, basically, AI is going to clear this out. Okay, we know it. We know it's coming. We've had a long time to prepare for this. We've got a bit longer to get this situation right. We need to make sure we're training people to be the people that tell the machines what to do. Those are the sort of what we call more strategic thinking jobs, and that means having a better education system so you get people ready for that reality.
So we shouldn't be kind of sad when we see these headlines about, well, you kind of do feel sad naturally because there's a human side of it, but you've just said, you know, the companies you work with in the mining space, one-person operation. You say to people out there trying to look for jobs, though.
But at the same time, there are jobs being created off these industries, and that they have these multiplier effects and that are going on. Look, I'm not the great believer in having a social wage. I don't believe that works. We've seen what happens with the welfare system within Aboriginal communities and in the western suburbs of Sydney, the breakdown of families, people, you know, the unemployment, the kids not going to school and all that type of stuff. So I don't support that whatsoever. It is about there will be a creation of jobs that we haven't even thought about. Could you imagine, you know, like my father was born just around the First World War. The idea of computers, the idea of people ordinary, normal people being able to fly around the world. It was sort of like luxury goods in those days. So you see all these things that are happening and changes that happen. When I was a kid, if someone said there's a mouse, I would have looked around for a little white thing running around the floor. So things change. Yeah.
It certainly seems like it all comes down to our ability to redeploy into the workforce once those jobs that we were talking about become redundant. So, you know, Sydney Uni here, what are our chances of being able to do that?
We can completely do this, but we need to make sure that we're preparing people to be agile, flexible. These are all the words we hear. But in the end,
what does it all mean, though? Be agile, be flexible.
Okay, I'll
still go, oh, right, what does that mean?
All right, I'll stop being a waffly old academic.
I might AI, which
You've been giving Aldi wine tonight?
And yeah, no, exactly. I might need to go and crack open a bottle. But I'll tell you what I mean by that. I mean that we know, and it's not a cliche, everybody's going to have to be a lifelong learner. We're not going to be able to stop learning. And actually, we need to do that. What happens at school and at university is you've got to unlock that in people. That sense in which actually it's not some conveyor belt. You leave school, you get a job and go to sleep, and it's just all carries on as forever. It's a state of mind.
I agree 100% with that. I have this line that's saying if you're not learning something, you're not picking up a new skill, then go see a doctor because you're probably dead.
Yeah, lifelong learning, I like.
Which will probably be a robot, but anyway.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, the robots put us to sleep sometimes in the end anyway. I suppose it all comes full circle. I don't know. But
it's not just going to be, it's not going to be just jobs in coals, it's going to be transportation. It'll be massive, the changes. How many, I can't remember quite the huge number of people that work in transportation. That's going to change. Accountancy, legal work, it's going to go right across the board.
I know lawyers who are shaking in their boots about the changes,
You've got to your show on Sunday, Warren. Oh, yes. Any of this come into kind of the discussion?
Well, yeah, there would be quite a few things. Like we've got Print Junction and talk about an industry, the printing industry that's been really smashed through with technology changes and that. Every 2 years they actually have to change all their machinery in their workshops. Right. And they're still going through. Got a very good business, Indigenous family, they're running that. You've got an interview with the chair of AMI, which is the Aboriginal Enterprises in Mining, Energy and Exploration. So looking about the Aboriginal people, you know, working in the mining industry and what's going on. Unbeknownst to a lot of people, 10% of the Australian mining industry is Aboriginal. That's through contracting and also mine operations. And also we have Arnie Marg, who does Aboriginal tours within the Sydney Harbour. A lot of people don't know that the Aboriginal art, the Aboriginal rock carvings in Sydney Harbour are more than what's on Uluru. Wow. And so you've got a whole lot of good stuff like that. Good. And then we've got several other reports and that to go through too. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, we're absolutely looking forward to that. Warren Mundine, thank you very much. Richard Miles, thank you for being here in the studio with us.
Thank you.